Have you ever stopped and asked yourself, why do I even want to be financially independent in the first place? And I'm not talking about numbers and spreadsheets. I mean the deep reasons, the ones that keep you going when life throws every curveball it can.
Because if your why isn't crystal clear, the how will never feel worth it. Like Nietzsche said, he who has a strong enough why can bear almost any how. That's at the heart of this final episode of the FI Crash Course.
Over the past 11 episodes, we've broken down every tool you need, from budgeting to debt payoff, investing, taxes, insurance, you name it. But today, we're pulling it all together and asking the only question that really matters. What kind of life are you actually building it all for?
And once you know that, we'll show you how to put everything into motion. From mastering the gap, that simple equation of income minus expenses to grow your income, investing with confidence, and even protecting your family with smart insurance moves today.
We'll revisit the big 3 expenses that can make or break your timeline, share the 5 rules of stress-free investing, and reveal how a few smart tax and insurance decisions can keep your money in your pocket and not Uncle Sam's.
Whether you're just starting to pay off debt or you're already stacking investments, this is the episode that ties it all together. By the end, you'll have a roadmap, you'll have motivation, and you'll have the tools to create a life filled with joy, freedom, and meaning.
So grab your notebook and get ready to start writing stuff down, because the journey doesn't end here. This is really just the beginning. So let's dive into the final step of the FI Crash Course. This is the FI Guys. Let's get into it.
Welcome to the FI Guys podcast, the show where we dive deep into the world of financial independence and personal finance. Whether you're just starting out on your journey or well on your way to financial freedom, we've got the insights and strategies you need to achieve your financial goals.
In each episode, we'll provide actionable tips and real-life success stories to inspire and guide you on your path to financial independence. So, grab your notepad and get ready to transform your financial future with the FI Guys podcast. Let's get started. The FI Guys is a podcast dedicated to providing general information and insights on a wide range of wealth-related topics. The views and opinions expressed in this podcast are those of the host and guests and do not constitute personalized financial advice.
The content provided in this podcast is for educational and informational purposes only. It should not be considered a substitute for professional financial advice. Your financial situation and goals are unique, and the information provided here may not be applicable or suitable for your specific circumstances.
We, the host and the guests of the FI Guys, are not acting as your financial advisor. We are not aware of your individual financial situations, risk tolerance, or investment objectives. Any decisions or actions you take based on the information provided on this podcast are your own and made at your own risk. I may be a financial advisor, but I am not your financial advisor. And now that the lawyers are happy, let's get started.
Welcome back to the FI Crash Course, and congratulations on making it to episode 12, the grand finale of the series. Over the past 11 episodes, we've covered everything from crushing your debt to boosting your income, to investing smart and tax strategies. Today, we're pulling it all together. This is where the numbers meet purpose, why you're trying to achieve financial independence. So it stops becoming a plan on paper and becomes the life you've intentionally wanted to design. So settle in as we wrap up the course with the most important piece of all, and that's discovering your why. This is going to keep you moving forward long after this series ends. So I want to go back, Dominic, to episode 110 of the FI Crash Course, Discovering Your Why. What do you remember about that podcast so we can try to tell our listeners the most important pieces?
Well, that was a huge one, right? That was the start of our journey, our start of our embarkation, right? So one of the main takeaways from episode 110, and just to preface, guys, for those who don't know, we do the Monday episode is like the main meat and potatoes, and then the Friday episode is the recap. So Monday 110, you get all the meat and potatoes, and if you wanted a little bit more of like a Cliff Note version, episode 111 as well. So just a heads up. One of the main takeaways from Monday's episode was a quote that we kind of based the episode around from Nietzsche. And he said, "He who has a strong enough why can bear almost any how." And that's really at the core of our beliefs, not just with this course, with episode 110, but the way that we kind of carry ourselves through life. So like we said, a strong enough why can bear any how. And if your why isn't strong enough, well, it's going to crumble under the pressure of how am I going to do this? How can I get this done? Right. So that's why we always have to start with the strong why, something that isn't necessarily centered around you, but centered around something that really drives you. Because let's be honest, oftentimes we lie to ourselves, we let ourselves down, and we're okay with that. But maybe there's a person or something in your life that, hey, I can't let them down. I can't let little granny down, Granny Dom. I can't let her down, right? Something like that. So making your why super strong. I mean, if you miss that step on this journey, we're taking a dangerous leap, right? So this is a very important step. That's why it's number one.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people overlook this step because it's so easy. It just becomes such like people automatically say, of course, I know what my why is. But I need our listeners to really try to internalize this. Your journey of financial independence starts and ends with purpose. Your why is the compass that keeps you moving when the path gets tough. Because I can promise you, and Dominic can promise you, that the path will get tough. There will be things that are going to come. You might have the perfect plan, but life is going to punch you in the face. So you need to ask yourself, is the goal freedom to travel, more time with your family, a career change, early retirement? Whatever your reason, naming it is the first step towards creating a plan that will last. But if you just say, I want $5 million, $10 million, and everyone just goes, okay, yeah, that sounds good. That sounds reasonable. But then they ask, why do you want that? And you go, I don't know. Because society, my mom, grandma, some guy on TV told me that that's what I needed. You're never actually going to get there.
No, yeah, like like you said, right? If your goal isn't specified and it's generalized, well, we're going to have a little bit of an issue, right? Maybe pause the podcast right here and go back to episode 110. But for those who know their why, know themselves, we're going to move on to segment two. What about segment two, though, Chris?
Yeah. In episode 112, we started talking about understanding financial independence. What is it really? And at its core, financial independence is really simple. A lot of people try to make it as difficult as it can, but we like to try to simplify everything that we possibly can just so people can listen to it and not get overburdened or concerned with these big words. So all we said was, in order to make financial independence simple, all we have to do is do our income, how much money we're making, minus our expenses, how much money we're spending, and that equals the gap. With that gap, our savings, that is the driver to financial independence. That is the engine to our freedom in this life. So in that episode, we learned about the origins of the 4% rule that was developed by the Trinity University researchers to estimate how much you can safely withdraw from your retirement to be able to call yourself financially independent. And just as a quick recap, again, go back and listen to episode 112 if you haven't heard this before. But in order to calculate your FI number, it doesn't matter how much money you're making. It doesn't matter how much money you have of investments. The real driver of it is how much money do you spend? Because if you don't know that number, you're really moving in the dark without a compass, without a flashlight. But once you know how much money you spend a year, all you have to do is times that annual expense by 25. And that is a safe rule of thumb to get you know where you're going. Because I've heard people say, oh, in order to retire, Susie Irwin says, I need $15 million in 6 houses. Dave Ramsey says, I need $5 million. But for most Americans who live on a budget of around $60,000, well, that only means that you need about $1.25 million. If you have a $40,000 a year budget after taxes that you spend, that only means that you need $1 million in investments to be able to pull 4% from. So when you actually know where you're going, it gives you a landmark to achieve rather than saying $15 million, $20 million, some random number that someone pulled out of their ass and you took as truth. So you need to track your savings rate and know how quickly you're moving towards your financial independence, the life that you want.
I agree. These numbers should be based in reality, not based in fantasy. I need 20 million to retire. Where did that come from? What are you, robbing a bank? I need 20 million. I need 20 million and a private jet. Where is this number coming from, right? So yeah, that's what I love about that simple equation. Income minus expenses equals savings. You kind of get right down to the meat and potatoes of it all and really simplify what's going on in your finances. And man, that takes a lot of the pressure off. It takes a lot of the complexity away from it. So if you're kind of on overload a little bit on what to do financially for your future retirement and everything, 112, episode 112, that's the one for you. That is a great episode. And for me, it simplified a lot of things.
And I think the biggest thing that we got from episode 112 is when you go online, majority of the rules that you're going to hear are made for the general public. And you listening is not the general public. You are an individual. So that's the reason that we try to personalize everything. That's the reason we had the Fi Guys try to stay away from general rules of what you should do and shouldn't do. We try to say everything is specific. 80% of being good with finances has to do with your mindset. 80% of personal finance is personal, not finance. So we need to work on that side, making everything specific to you. Because if you think that I need $15 million in order to retire, that might work for somebody else. But you in your life may not be able to ever achieve that. And most people will quit before they even have to start trying. Like our old friend Henry Ford once said, whether you think you can or whether you think you can't, you're right. Because if you hear that you need $15 million to retire and you believe I can't do that, you're never going to even try to take the steps to achieve that. But if you hear, hey, I make $40,000 a year right now. Oh, all I need is $1 million rather than 15 million. Well, that's actually achievable. Maybe I can take the steps to achieve that. In segment 3, episode 114, we started talking about mastering debt and building stability. Debt is one of the biggest breaks on our financial journey to financial independence. And when we remove that, we begin to be able to gain momentum, just like driving down a hill. What do you remember about that episode 114?
Well, we live in a world where debt is just unavoidable, right? I mean, you show up to college campus with $100,000 in debt, maybe not that much, maybe 40,000, maybe 20,000, right? And they hit you with hey, we're with the credit card company. We want to give you a credit card because you're a college student. And we love giving away free things. And so many people fall for it. And they get credit cards and they don't know how to use them and they spend recklessly and they get cash advances on a credit card. Insane work. Um, we're not saying debt is bad, right? Debt is actually a great tool. We love debt, the right kind of debt. But a lot of consumer debt, most of consumer debt is pretty bad, not great. We'll say it's not great, right? So you're not going to get out of this life without using debt, right? But knowing how to master it, knowing how to use it so it doesn't use you is very important. Can be the difference between the $1 million or $10 million, right? It's a great episode. I like that episode. And I liked part of what we talked about in episode 114, if I'm not mistaken. We talked a little bit, there's an emergency fund, right? But we also talked about a crisis fund, which I think is something that, I've never really heard around the internet, but on our podcast, which I'm really excited about. But the crisis fund, and maybe you want to explain a little bit more than me, since you're the kind of the creator of it, Chris, the idea of it, at least.
Yeah, for sure. I've always kind of hated I remember when I was growing up, we didn't have a lot of money. And even when I got started on this journey towards financial independence, we didn't have a lot of money. And for people to say, in order to even get started, you need 3 to 6 months to a year of money saved up. For me, it was like, okay, well, that's impossible. So I'm not even going to start. So that's the reason that we created the crisis fund. And the crisis fund was it originally started as $1,000 in cash that you had in your bank account. But over time, we've morphed that to make it more specific to each individual. So what we said is the crisis fund should be held in ideally cash. If you're the kind of person that if you see cash doesn't have to spend said cash, but it should be whatever your highest deductible is. Either that be for your insurance, your renters, car insurance, health insurance, whatever your highest deductible is, whether that be $500, $1,000, $1,500. Because the nice thing is, if something big in life, if a crisis really happens, typically, and again, I use that word typically, those things are insured. So you want to be able to cover that deductible with that crisis fund. And what I've seen from working with so many people is once they have that crisis fund, once they've saved up that money, which is a lot easier to save up $1,000 than 6 months worth of expenses, it shows them that, hey, I can make progress. I can do this one step at a time and get a little bit better. When talking about getting a little bit better, we also talked about in episode 114 different debt payoff strategies, whether that be the debt snowball, the debt avalanche, or something that the FI guys introduced, the hybrid method, where you take a little bit of both in order to achieve our goals. And then the most important thing we talked about is you have to make a commitment to no new debt as you move towards financial freedom. Just like Dominic said, debt is not a bad thing, but there is nothing that comes free in this life. So when people give you that credit card and say, oh, don't worry, it's free money, there is nothing that's free. The piper will always have to be paid.
Yeah.
That will come at some point.
So what did we talk about in the next episode?
Yeah. In episode 116, that's where we started talking about wealth building in one simple equation. And we kind of harken back to episode 112 in this and talking about the driver to financial independence, that gap. We really try to hammer home that it is income minus expenses equals savings. That savings, that gap, allows you to do everything that you need. That is the driver. That is the engine. That is everything that we need in order to move towards financial independence. And the reason we dedicate an entire episode to it is because it's so simple that people overlook it. People think, oh, that's dumb. I don't even want to talk about that. Just tell me what are the ultra wealthy doing? That's what I need to do. I'm not even in the same stratosphere, the same level of the game, but I want to know what they're doing. It'd be like you take your kid to Pop Warner football and you're like, all right, this is your first day. We've got you some pads. We're going to run you through the drills that the NFL does. And you're just going to start destroying kids and be like, I don't know why you guys can't do it. This is what these guys do. You need to build up. And this is the foundation. These are those drills.
I just imagine like taking him to like the weight room. It's like, what do you mean you can't squat 600 pounds? Like, come on, little Jimmy. Put your back into it. Like, come on. 100%. 100%. I think, everybody wants to be wealthy, but they don't want to do the work it takes to get there and learn the knowledge and learn the steps, right? Everybody wants to know what specs they want on their new Ferrari, but they don't want to learn about tax optimization to help get there. Everybody loves the view. Nobody enjoys the climb. Thankfully, you got two guests that are willing to explain to you the climb and guide you on this beautiful journey to help you get there a little bit quicker, a little bit faster, right? A little bit more enjoyable. Because if you're doing it by yourself, it can be done, has been done, but it's more difficult. It's always better to go with someone who's been there, a guide, right? That's why we're here.
So as we move forward, the big things I want you to take away from episode 116 is you need to grow your income beyond just your paychecks. And what I mean by that is you need to be able to invest your money. You need to get your money working for you. And if your paycheck isn't enough to bring in enough money, well, we need to look for ways to bring in more money, whether that be side hustle or a small business or being able to jump careers. And that's actually a different podcast we're going to talk about here in a second. But when we talk about growing your income, that's one part of the equation. But I feel like that's the part of the equation that everyone focuses on, without forgetting that there's another part of the equation, and that's reducing your expenses intentionally by getting rid of things that don't move the needle on your happiness and your joy. Because I think a lot of people, they don't want to think about like, what do I have to sacrifice to get to financial independence? There's one thing I always like to tell my students, and that's every dollar that you're able to save is a dollar closer to your financial independence, closer to living the life on your terms with money not being a barrier to that. And it does take sacrifice. So rather than ask yourself, what am I willing to do? Ask yourself, what am I not willing to give up? And then build your plan around that.
Yeah, and I think that was one of the key moments of that episode where everybody says that I'm willing to do anything. All right, let's play that card, right? Are you willing to not get your nails done? Are you willing to not get your hair cut? Are you willing to give up these certain amenities of your life that are costing you a great deal? I don't know. We'll see. All right, are you willing to get rid of that $900 car payment? I know it makes you look fancy. That was a big one. That was a big mental shift episode, I believe. I think there's a lot of great gems in that episode. And that was 116, correct, Chris?
Yes. And now I say we move on to episode 118 of the FI Crash Course. And this was maximizing the impact of the big three expenses. Because I think too often when you go and you look for financial advice, they talk about, oh, you just got to cut out the $5 coffees. If you cut that out, you're going to be good. Like that's all you need to do. And we here say that the big three categories for your budget, which include housing, transportation, and food, will make or break your timeline to financial independence. Because when you're looking at saving, I always say, why would we want to focus on these $5 decisions when there's these $5,000 decisions sitting right in front of us every day? We talked about food and ways to reduce that by cooking at home, meal planning, buying in bulk. We talked about transportation and being able to maintain your vehicle. Carpool, bike, embrace remote work if you can. And don't go around trying to buy the newest, fanciest things to keep up with the Joneses, to keep up with people that don't even know they're in competition with you. And then the biggest thing was housing. We talked about considering house hacking, co-living, relocating, lowering your utilities, looking at insurance costs. There's so many ways that we can look at this, but too many people look at these three categories, food, transportation, housing, and they use this word, oh, Chris, that's fixed. Those are fixed expenses. And since they're fixed, it means that I can't change it. I think we have to be very cautious with the words that we use. Because whenever you use that word, I can't do it, you can just replace it with I don't want to. So it's not I can't change these expenses, it's I don't want to change these expenses. I don't want to trade in that car that I bought that I shouldn't have. I don't want to downsize to a house that's smaller than what I currently have. And if that's the choice you choose to make, that is fine. But then you can't sit there and complain that you're not getting other things out of it, because you have to be able to give and take. There's an old quote from Ray Dalio that I've always loved. It's you can have anything in life, but you can't have everything. Everything comes at a cost. And by mastering these three areas, it helps to accelerate you on your path to more than any other little latte ever could.
I mean, how many lattes would $5 a latte equal for a 5,000 decision? I mean, that's a lot of lattes. Right? You're gonna end up drowning yourself in lattes, right? Which for some might be a good way to go. What about the next one, Chris? I know
Episode
that big
120,
three
we started
was
talking about
important.
ways to increase your income. And
Okay.
I feel like this is one of the most important ones because it's really difficult. And this is what I've always hated about when you go online. They're just like, oh, just make more money. And people
Yeah.
hear that and they're like, oh, I didn't know it was that simple. You know, I always think when I'm in jiu-jitsu, right, or when you fight, and every so often you'll get put into a bad situation, and your coach will be on the side, and they'll just be like, you know, you're in side control and you're stuck on your back and you're doing everything you can, and the coach will be like, just get up, and you're like, oh, thanks, I didn't know it was mind blown. It's that
Genius.
simple.
Yeah.
And it feels like that when people say, oh, just make more money. It's like,
Mhm.
I'm trying and I don't know how to do that. So in episode 120, we talked about ways to increase your income, because you can only cut so far in your budget before your life gets down to a floor that you don't want it to be at. But your earnings have no ceiling. You can earn indefinitely, or you can only cut to so far. So in that episode, we introduced 7 steps to earn yearly raises. I'm not going to go through all of them, but we talked about performing well, be likable, network, dress for success, develop skills, manage yourself, and make yourself marketable. I guess I did talk about all 7 of them, but go back to episode 120 to actually hear each one of those.
Yeah.
We also talked about ways to elevate your current job and its pay. And we explored having to maybe leave your job, because the old adage of stay with a company for 40 years because they're going to treat you right if you treat them right, that's out the window. Companies will fire you in a day and hire somebody to replace you in a second. It just doesn't matter anymore. And you need to be willing to take care of yourself, because the company will not take care of you. And we also talked about, Dominic, your favorite part, side hustles, ways to increase your income without having to get a promotion or without having to job hop. And one thing we introduced in that podcast was talking about that side hustles are on the rise. There's more people with side businesses than ever before, and how wonderful of a thing that is. And on the opposite side of the coin, how terrible that is that people have to find other ways of work to be able to support their lives, because the work that they do have is not being able to provide for them with the way that costs are going.
Yeah. Yeah, the rise of the side hustle. And I kind of missed that episode. I miss talking about side hustles. I really do. Maybe we bring it back. I think we should have another episode on side hustles. I feel like a lot has changed. I have a lot more new knowledge on side hustles now. So maybe future podcast we'll drop another side hustle one. But yeah, that's a great episode. I'm going to say that about every episode. I'm a bit of a fanboy when it comes to the Fi Guys, right? But the next episode, we talked a little bit about tax optimization. Now, this is probably one of the more boring episodes in the entire series. And Chris and I really tried our hardest to liven it up because, let's be honest, I don't want to talk about taxes. Chris is not big on talking about taxes. Nobody wants to talk about taxes, but it's one of the things that is inevitable in life. I mean, what's the saying? There's two things you can't avoid: death and taxes, right? If we can talk about taxes for maybe 30, 40 minutes, get it out of the way, improve your life, maybe 10%, well, I think that's worth it, right? What did we, I just want to get over this one as quickly as possible. Just the idea of talking about taxes is killing me right now, Chris. Please take over, please. Get me out of this spell.
Yeah, I'll just take this real fast, then we'll talk about investing because I know that that's what people love. So the reason we talked about tax optimization is because it is important. It's one of the biggest expenses we have in life. Taxes are going to eat up about 20 to 30% of your income, which is a huge part of it. So you have to understand what taxes are there for, and you have to know how I can legally minimize my tax bill. And that's a very important part legally, because there are ways around taxes that are not worth it. Yes, you might be able to save a few $1,000s, but the chance of you going to jail is not worth it. So we talked about understanding marginal versus effective tax rates. If you don't know what that means, it is very important. I challenge you to go and listen back to episode 126 of the FI Crash Course to understand that just because you go into a next marginal tax bracket, that does not mean that all of your income is taxed at that rate. We also talked about understanding tax advantage accounts to lower your liabilities and speed up your wealth building. And most importantly, we talked about smart planning that puts you, not the IRS, in control of your tax rates, ways to legally reduce your tax burden every year. Again, listen to episode 126 and 127 to hear all of that. But I want to go back to episode 122 and 124. Those were investing made simple. We actually dedicated that 2 episodes to that. A simple path to financial independence. What we introduced in that is that the stock market is a roller coaster, but over time, it rises very steadily. So I know a lot of people, they'll go on to Bloomberg, CNBC, Fox Money, and they'll sit there and they'll see these numbers, Dow this way, S&P this way, NASDAQ this way, red, green, percentages all over the place. And they have no idea what it means. All they know is if I see green, I get to be happy. If I see red, I get to be mad, without any underlying understanding of that. And how difficult is that to tie your life, the way that you feel, to something that's completely out of your control? Over time, if you take a wider perspective, the economy will go through downturns, and those downturns are temporary. You need to be able to take a larger perspective to see that on the long term, growth is the norm. Getting better is the norm. But if you focus on these little minute details, these minute moments, you're going to be all over the place and you're just going to be stressing yourself out for no reason. So in episodes 122 and 124, we talked about the 5 rules of success for investing. And those were that the market tends to go upwards on the long term, that corrections are inevitable and unpredictable. And that means that they will be coming. So just be okay with that. It's a fee for playing the game, not a fine. Number 3, no one can time the market consistently. And anyone that says that they know how, get the hell away from them, because they are lying to you. Because that basically means that they know what the future holds. If they say they know what the market's going to do tomorrow, just ask them, what are the lotto numbers? I'd rather just have that. Number 4, once you know the basics, less attention can actually do more. And I think this is really difficult for people to understand, is that in investing, it's one of the few things in life that you can just set it and get the hell out of the way and just let it work for you in the background. And it will actually outperform you getting in there and doing stuff wrong. And number 5, don't panic when the market drops. Again, corrections will happen. It is inevitable. It is a fee for playing the game, not a fine for doing it wrong. You get to harness the power of index funds and ETFs to capture market returns without the guesswork. And how lucky are we that we're in a time and place where we get to have these tools at our disposal to be able to buy huge swaths of the market. So as some things go down, some things go up, and we get to win without having to have specific knowledge. You get to win passively. And that's pretty damn cool. It's the first time in history that you could do that. easily from your phone right now.
It's an exciting time. It's a very exciting time, and it's an exciting time to maybe like the video, right? Share the video, subscribe if you're not already subscribed, right? If you've already watched any of these episodes, highly recommend liking, sharing with a friend or a loved one. Where do we go from here, Chris?
I say we move over to episode 128, insurance and protecting your family's assets. Now, when we first did this original FI crash course, this was something I didn't want to talk about. It was something that I knew was important, but from my experience being as a financial advisor, I've always got kind of skeeved out by insurance just because of the way that the products are usually structured. And by that, I mean, the person that's selling to you is usually selling to get a commission back. And sometimes when the commission structure is unaligned with the incentives of the individual you're selling towards, bad things can happen. But at the time we were doing this, we actually heard from somebody from our viewer mailbag who had lost their wife. And in that, they had no insurance and the person had no ability to care for their kids and work. So that's when I knew at that time, we need to put insurance into here. And we're just going to talk about making sure that you're looking out for your loved ones and that you find someone that's looking out for you in your best interest. And I thought, hey, the best way for us to do that is to tell people what they need to be looking for. Because insurance is risk management. It's how you safeguard everything you've built. So insurance is very, very important. And there are ways to lower your costs by adjusting your deductibles, shopping twice a year, and bundling your policies. We're not going to go super deep into this episode right now because I feel like episode 128, we went very, very deep into every single thing that we need to talk about here. But there are essential coverages and non-essential coverages when it comes to insurance. And that's something that I do want to bring up. Things like your home, renters, auto, medical, short-term disability, and maybe a term life insurance. Those things are important. Just because you can insure everything, though, it doesn't mean that you should insure everything. Preparing your loved ones by organizing your wills, medical directives, and your key documents is also something we discussed on that to make sure that you have a legacy plan set up. We talked about everything when it comes to death and protection on that episode 128. And I know it's maybe not the most fun conversation, but it is, if something does happen, one of the most impactful. Maybe not for you, but for the people that you love. And if you are insured and if something happens to you, then it's going to be very impactful for you.
You know, one of my main takeaways from that episode was insurance is not there to make you rich. It's there to make you whole again. And I love that line because so many people, maybe you guys are included, I know I was always, it's like, oh, you can make, insurance, you can make money off the policy. It's like, that's not the purpose of it. It's not the purpose of it, right? You've been hit. It's to bring you back to where you were.
Yeah, and that's something that we talked a lot about in that episode. More in episode 129, we talked about just the way that the insurance industry has rolled everything up to say, like, these insurance products are investments. And they are insurance products first and foremost. They are there to make you whole. They're there to protect you. And they have insurance components. That does not mean that the entire part of it is an investment. And I've always wondered to myself, why would I go and buy an insurance product that has an investment component when I can just go and buy a full investment? By investing in the stock market, by buying an ETF, by buying a mutual fund, by buying a stock, by buying equity in a company, building a business, something like that, rather than giving me just a little portion of an insurance part that has insurance, that has investing inside of it, you can go buy the entire thing. And you can have your insurance on the side for cheaper by not having those investment components in there. But again, if you need to know more about that, go to episode 128, 129. And then finally, in episode 130, episode 11 of the FI Crash Course, we talked about higher education and lifelong learning. And this is what I want to preface this entire part with, is that education is an investment, but is not a one-size-fits-all. There is a personal part to this journey. Dominic, what do you remember about that episode that we just had last week?
Gosh, it's crazy to me that was last week. It's crazy to me that was so recent. One of the things we can always do to make an impact in our life, but in everyone else's life, is to continue to sharpen the sword that is our mind, right? Abraham Lincoln once said that if you're going to cut a tree down and you have 12 hours, right, spend the first 11 hours sharpening your axe, right? Because it's going to be a lot easier to cut the tree with a sharpened axe an adult one, right? I every episode we talked about today is very important, some more important than others. But if you had to pick a few to keep, on replay, episode, 130 is definitely an important one. Learning how to learn, being excited to learn. Learning is not a chore, right? It shouldn't be a chore. If learning feels like a chore to you, I think you're doing it wrong. I think you're doing it wrong. I think you're doing it wrong in a big way, right? There's so many different ways to learn nowadays that, man, why not spend an hour, couple hours a week really sharpening yourself? Everybody wants to be that cool person. I'm not going to lie to you. Everybody wants to be that cool person, right? Maybe you're at a cocktail party or your aunt says something and you're like, oh, yes, I read about that here and blah, 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 blah. And you talk at length for it. And everybody has that like, oh, wow, where did he learn that? That's crazy. Everybody wants that, right? But nobody wants to take the time to learn it. It's so much fun learning. And I encourage you. I mean, you're already here. You're already learning. And we celebrate you for that. But make sure to keep learning and always stay learning. That's how you stay young. That's how your mind stays young. Your mind is just like a muscle, right? You don't use it, well, you're going to lose it. So make sure you're using that mind.
Yeah. In that episode, we talked a lot about college versus trade schools and the path that fits your life and your finances, because there is no one size fits all. And the biggest thing I want you to get from this is either if you're young and you're still in school or you're older and you're out of school and you're working, graduation is just the start of this learning journey. You should continue learning indefinitely. The only time that we stop learning is when we pass away. And who knows, maybe you keep learning beyond that. We don't know, but keep on learning the entire way that you can, because one of the few things you get to take with you at the end of your life is your wisdom. You get to take that with you. So please build this as much as you can. And I want to bring up a quote from Marcus Aurelius. This is from his book, Meditations. The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. If you just sit there and don't make any action, you try to do nothing about this, it will become the thing that stands in the way. But if you push yourself, if you try to learn, if you try to get better every single day, and this is the biggest thing that we took away from episode 130, I'm not asking you to go from where you are right now to Einstein. I'm only asking for 1% better. And these aggregation of marginal gains, 1%, 0.5%, adds up into something really big. A little bit becomes a lot. So stay curious, keep learning. Passion-driven education pays dividends for your entire life. If you don't want to learn something, you don't have to learn that thing. Go and learn something else. And maybe, just maybe, if you learn enough, eventually you'll get back around to that thing that you didn't want to learn about, because you'll see the interconnective nature of how it connects with everything else. And then it'll finally be interesting to you.
Yeah.
The one who sees the way broadly sees it in all things.
And I love that quote. And I especially love the Marcus Aurelius quote. You were just saying, what stands in the way becomes the way. That is powerful. I know there's stuff today that you're probably avoiding doing. And maybe there's vices that you're going to that you know you shouldn't go to, right? And what stands in the way becomes the way. And like the Lorax says, which way does a tree fall? It falls the way it leans. A lot of quotes today. I love quotes. We got to get the quotes in there. But yes, is that all the episodes? There's technically one more episode, right?
Well, there is one episode, and that's the episode we're doing right now. That's one episode 132. And the reason that we're doing this episode is to recap everything so people know where to go. But I think the most important thing is to review and to revisit these teachings, because change happens one step at a time. And the reason that we have this full crash course starting from the beginning to the end is because people are at different parts of the journey. And just because you heard it all once and you're at one part of the journey, you're like, okay, I know what to do now, and I know everything else, you're going to have to revisit when you get to that next part of the journey. So please continue to listen to this and use this maybe as a barometer to be like, where did I need to go back to listen to that? What do they talk about in these episodes? So I can remember. And that leads us to our action step this week. I want you to go back and re-listen to one episode of the FI Crash Course, an episode that speaks to you most of where you are today. And just please pick one action step and implement it this week, Because every single week for the FI crash course, these past 11 weeks, we have left you with an action step that if you take a little bit of steps towards it, you will get better. You will aggregate 1% more. Because we always say it here on the FI crash course. We said it in the FI guys every single podcast, and we butcher it every time we try. But that is that education without action is just entertainment. Ding, got it first try.
Let's freaking go. We've
Just
been on
because
a
you sit
streak.
here and you absorb the knowledge, you listen to the knowledge, if you don't do anything with it, it means nothing. You need to go into the arena. You need to try to get better. You need to move forward, fail, learn, and continue moving. I always say it, and I know it's one of the hardest things for me because I hate failure. I hate it with a grand passion. And what I need to always remind myself is that failure is the most data-rich income stream that we have available to us. So rather than hating failure or doing things to avoid failure, try to fail as many times as you possibly can. And I know that's difficult because I hate failing. But every time that I have failed, I have learned so much more from those failures than I did from my wins. At my jiu-jitsu gym, inside the training room, there's a little thing and it says, when you win, but when you lose, you learn. And I look at that every time. And whenever I get tapped, or yesterday I got caught in a pretty bad baseball choke that I didn't see coming. And immediately I learned, like, okay, when I feel them grabbing my collar in that direction, I shouldn't try to pass their guard. Like, I learned it. And now I have to reapply it over and over and over again, because as soon as you learn it once, you have to revisit it. You have to put yourself into the arena over and over and over again. And Dominic, before I have you close out, I want you to know that just because the FI crash course may be complete, this is only the beginning. Financial independence isn't about numbers. It's about living intentionally, using money as a tool to create more joy, more freedom, and more meaning in your life every day. And with that, I'm going to give you the pod, Dom.
I love it. I love it. Well, guys, like Chris said, action step of the week, go back and listen to one of the episodes, whatever one that kind of caught your eye or caught your ear today, just go back and listen. Take a friend with you. Why not? Right? This has been a really fun journey. You know, from when we first recorded the crash course, we were in a different place. And now we recorded it here. Who knows when we'll record it again? I don't know. Maybe we'll have a full production studio. I don't know. Maybe we'll add new things to the crash course. It's been a lot of fun going on this journey with you guys. And no, it's not ending. And I love what Chris said, right? You know, this is just the beginning. This is just the beginning. Now we can get back to talking about the nuanced different things that are happening. I've been craving a little bit of a philosophy pod. I've been craving one. I won't deny. Maybe in a couple of weeks, we'll drop a philosophy pod. But I hope you guys have taken notes. I hope you guys have taken everything you can out of these episodes. If you want, grab the link to these episodes, throw it in your AI and have it summarize it, right? Whatever. Obviously better to listen. You get a little bit more nuance. But hey, if you're more of a visual learner where you read it a little bit better, well, maybe that's for you though. But whatever way you consume the podcast, whether that's on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, heck, I don't know, all the other ones, right? We appreciate you guys. And we're going to be here continuing to put out these amazing episodes and continuing to learn on this journey, right? Because for us, it's not about the destination. It's about seeing where the journey takes us. And that's what's exciting about learning. That's what's exciting about financial independence. That's what's exciting about life. So if you have enjoyed that, we appreciate you guys very much. Any final thoughts, Chris?
No, just thank you guys for joining. I hope you listen to all the episodes. If you haven't, go back and start at maybe episode 100. This is the FI guys, and then go right to episode 110 and just restart the FI crash course. But just because we're done with the crash course, that does not mean that we're done with the FI guys. We're continuing this journey. We want to keep learning. We already have some really fun guests lined up for you. And we have heard your comments that you prefer our conversations than the guests. We're going to take that with a grain of salt. We'll still probably bring on guests because I think it's important to hear from different views, but thank you for enjoying our conversations better than conversations with guests. But we do have some guests lined up here in the next few weeks. Dominic, I've already been working on a philosophy template that we're going to be talking about here coming up soon. So we're going to have a very fun conversation. But just because we're done with the course, that does not mean that we're done with financial independence, because this journey continues. And there's always new ways to bring this up, to talk about this in just slightly different ways, different philosophies, different ways of thinking about things. And that's the fun part of this journey, and that we get to do it together. So please share the Fi Guys with a friend. Bring someone along for this journey. We need you guys to spread this message, to be evangelists, to go out there and try to help people, not because you think that you're better than them, because you want people to come along on this journey. My mission in life, and Dominic, you're here with me too, is to get money out of the way so that people can focus on what matters most in life. Because from what I've seen my entire life is people say, I can't do that because of this, because money. And I just hated hearing that. I hate that in my own life. So I want to be able to teach people that they don't have to be subservient to a job that they hate, subservient to a boss that's an asshole. You can take control of your life. It just takes time. It takes intention, and it takes work. And we're going to be here for you every step of the way to support you best we can. So we will see you back this coming Friday for Five Friday feedback with a really fun viewer mailbag. I'm not sure how we're going to recap this episode of a recap. We'll probably talk about something else and some wins of the week. Guys, thank you so much for joining us for the Fi Crash Course. Dominic, please close us out.
All righty. Well, guys, we'll see you on Friday. Make sure to like, subscribe, share with a friend, make good choices. And I'm Dom. He's Chris. We're the Fi Guys. We'll see you on Friday. Later, guys.
This video podcast is sponsored by Monzon Wealth. The content in this podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be considered financial advice. We do not endorse specific products or services. Past performance does not guarantee future results. The opinions expressed are those of the host and guests, not the podcast sponsor.
It is crucial to consult with a qualified financial advisor or professional who can provide advice tailored to your specific needs before making any financial decisions, investments, or taking any other actions. If you are seeking specified help, you can reach out to Chris at monzonwealth.com.